Hamas says it'll respond quickly to a new proposal for a pause in the fighting and more hostage and prisoner exchanges.
Many protesting French farmers remain on the barricades Friday despite calls to unblock the roads.
Hamas said on Friday it'll respond quickly to a proposal for extended pauses in the fighting in Gaza and phased exchanges of Israeli hostages for Palestinian prisoners. But crucially, the proposal does not include a permanent ceasefire. Israeli leaders have said they'll keep on fighting until Hamas is eradicated. More than 27,000 Gazans have been killed and over 66,000 wounded, according to the health ministry. 85% of the population have fled their homes, and a quarter of the population are now starving, according to the UN. Its children's agency now says about 17,000 children have been separated from their families during the conflict. The southern city of Khan Yunis has been a key target for Israel in recent weeks, and tens of thousands of residents have fled further south to Rafah on the border with Egypt. Israel's defense minister has said now there'll also be a military push on Rafah. The UN says the border town with Egypt is now a pressure cooker of despair.
In recent days, thousands of Palestinians have continued to flee to the south, which is already hosting over half the Gaza's population of some 2.3 million people. Most are living in makeshift structures, tents, or out in the open. Rafah is a pressure cooker of despair, and we fear for what comes next.
Also on Friday, near the Nitzana border crossing point, dozens of Israeli protesters attempted to block humanitarian aid from entering Gaza.
Many protesting French farmers remain on the barricades Friday despite calls to unblock the roads. Prime Minister Gabriel Attal announced a package of measures that include additional subsidies and permission to use pesticides allowed in other EU countries. Yet, protesters saw some contradictions between Attal's promises and what other ministers have been saying and decided to extend the protest at least into Friday.
Et donc en fait, on est dans l'attente finalement de précisions écrites de la part du gouvernement français pour bien comprendre ce qui a été dit, puisqu'en fait, il semble y avoir eu un peu de décalage entre la prise de parole du Premier ministre et de ses ministres. Donc en fait, on a demandé à ce qu'on nous fournisse des explications, des éléments supplémentaires pour mieux comprendre en fait ce qui a été exprimé.
In areas that have been blocked for several days, farmers offer free cartons of milk to drivers who manage to get through as a form of apology. On Thursday, as EU leaders met for the first summit of the year, protests broke out in Brussels and thousands of farmers gathered to address the summit. European leaders met with protesters' representatives. President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said that farmers can count on European support. In the meantime, farmers in more EU countries are joining the protest. On Thursday, protests broke out in Greece, Italy, Spain, and Portugal.
Commuters in Germany faced a second day of transport chaos as up to 90,000 public sector workers continued their strike. In most federal states, trains, buses and trams have ground to a halt. Bavaria was not affected, but in all other states, unions are calling for better pay and better working conditions. On Thursday, air travel was also disrupted. More than 1,000 flights were cancelled as security staff striked for better wages. The only airports working normally were those in Bavaria. Grandmothers have been taking to the streets in Germany's eastern state of Saxony to protest against the far right. The German intelligence agency has classified the Saxony branch of the far-right Alternative for Germany party as extremists. In the town of Döbeln, older women have got together to denounce the party, joining protests that have swept across the country in recent weeks. They say they want their grandchildren to grow up in a democracy, and they hope their protests will help stop the far right from making any more gains in elections.